I am the body snatcher. You know we love tummy tucks on this show. Welcome back to Boxing.
Welcome back, loyal fight fans, to another round of Boxing. I'm your humble host. I am Tummy Tom O'Neill. You know I appreciate the thumbs up and the subscribe button. If you guys don't mind, I put a lot of time and effort into this sport of boxing and talking about it, making picks, so on and so forth. And so you guys don't have to. And so we appreciate the thumbs up. We appreciate the subscriptions. Today is going to be a little bit of a special one that we've been putting together over the last few months, waiting for a time like this where we get a weekend that there's not such, great big fights on, that would maybe be a perfect time to go over some of this stuff. So this is going to be a talk about the boxing promotions, the different promotions there are, and the direct correlation between that and the matchmaking that you're seeing in boxing, and also versus the other promoters in boxing and the UFC, and why you may be seeing some better matchmaking most of the time throughout the year in the UFC. So we'll start off first off with DAZN, which, again, the video is going to be more about the correlation between fighter pay and how you're seeing the matchmaking, but we're also doing a little bit of a competition of who's the best promoter in boxing, who's the best promotional body in boxing. And I believe that that is DAZN, which is split up into two promotions really under that company of DAZN. And you have Eddie Hearn running Matchroom Sport, and you have Oscar De La Hoya running Golden Boy under DAZN. So basically, Oscar De La Hoya excluded a little bit because he doesn't really put on that many great fights at all. He's had a couple times where he's gotten close to it and they kind of fall out with the Ryan Garcia stuff. But he does, there are good fights that kind of happen to have happened on his network, but as far as the actual matchmaking and what you think would be an attractive fight, I don't see much out of Oscar De La Hoya. However, Eddie Hearn may in this last year or two have really won me over to believe that he's probably my favorite promoter in boxing, and the reason is because he works really well with others. A lot of times he's known for either co-promoting events. He tried to put together the Tyson Fury Anthony Joshua fight until it was said that it would happen, the third fight with Wilder and Fury, because that was kind of a delicate situation and Wilder going to court for that fight and whatnot. But before that, we were supposed to get Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury. That would have been Eddie Hearn working with ESPN Plus and Bob Arum, and I've just seen him talk a lot about that and trying to make that fight, and he just seemed very reasonable about he just wants the fight, and kind of the expectations are not great on his side. Besides Anthony Joshua getting the money that he wanted, he was willing to have it over on ESPN Plus and bring Anthony Joshua over there, do whatever that it really took. He was the one who kind of went out and laid the groundwork to try to make that fight happen. The other thing is that, Michael Conlan just had what might still at the end of this year end up being the fight of the year with Leigh Wood, and Leigh Wood is a DAZN fighter, but Michael Conlan coming over from ESPN Top Rank, so that was a good thing to see, these promoters working together. It happens from time to time, even the Fury Wilder 3, because Wilder's on PBC under Al Heyman. Even that, all three of those fights had to be worked together, flip-flopping which network they would be on, so on and so forth. But Eddie Hearn, I believe, is probably my favorite promoter, just because he really one clear point to be had about Eddie Hearn that we'll get into with these other promoters as well, is that Eddie Hearn doesn't ever shy away from mentioning other fighters that are on other networks and saying, we'd like to make this fight and let's try to make this fight happen, and what have you. Other promoters don't do that. They have to be asked directly, about another fighter in another organization, and then what they'll do is just try to, throw some simple saying out there like, well, we'll see what happens, or well, that's up to them, and you can just tell there's behind the scenes stuff going on. It's a sketchy whole thing. But Eddie Hearn just seems pretty upfront about stuff, and he's he's very concerned with just making good fights. Also, Eddie Hearn's going to be responsible for having the greatest women's fight of all time in women's combat sports in Katie Taylor versus Amanda Serrano coming up soon. So, you know, he just does a really good job. Also, they have a, you know, they have their own little mini podcast kind of deal on the app of DAZN and also on YouTube through the DAZN app, where they have you know, fighter analyst kind of duos that talk with each other about upcoming fights and so on and so forth. And you can't find not one damn episode where they don't mention other fighters from other promotions or fights that took place in other promotions and saying, wow, this was so great. This company seems very invested in boxing, and you know, Oscar De La Hoya kind of excluded from this. I'm just really more talking about Eddie Hearn on DAZN and Matchroom. Since he left Sky Sports, I just think he's just done such a great job, and he's winning over fans like me that can kind of see that he's a little bit more just concerned with making the good fights, like all promoters tell you they're concerned with. They're not showing us that. Eddie Hearn is showing us that. So I believe that Eddie Hearn, in specific, Matchroom with Eddie Hearn on DAZN is probably the best, you know, promotion. But here's the other thing. He also borders the line very well on what he pays fighters, because he doesn't underpay fighters. He's known for sometimes overpaying fighters, like Devin Haney, for instance, against competition that is not as elite as him, in not an all-star pay-per-view kind of thing. And also DAZN is almost pay-per-view-less. Now there's going to be a pay-per-views coming into the fray with them a bit, but yeah, they're not just concerned with pay-per-views and having you pay for it. They just, if you have the app, you've at least for this whole time, you've been really just getting all the fights, no matter who it is, even when it's Anthony Joshua, even when it's been Canelo, and they're just not pay-per-views if they're on DAZN. That may be changing a little bit here soon. But yeah, that's kind of my thing on that, and that he just works well with others, you know. Then we'll go over Bob Arum and ESPN Top Rank. So he's my second choice, not Bob Arum. That makes me feel uncomfortable, but in total, Top Rank on being on ESPN gets a lot of eyeballs, which is great. Now Bob Arum's a little bit notorious for underpaying his fighters. You know, he doesn't kind of ride the line even as like Eddie Hearn does, where he's not, you know, sometimes he'll overpay. Like, he's certainly not underpaying fighters, but he's not paying extravagant amounts either. And this is what we're going to kind of talk about here today is the money line. Everything is run by money. Everything in this world is to do with money, really, when it comes down to it. So that's not just about this sport. It's like anything else in life, and it comes down to the money and how you see it. So talking about the matchmaking, now ESPN Plus puts on some good matchmaking with Top Rank. Bob Arum puts on some good fights sometimes, man. He's got quite a few good names under his promotional banner, and he has had them fight, mix back and forth, and fight each other, do rematches, so on and so forth. We get a lot out of the ESPN Plus app. Not to mention, if you're a UFC fan, which is really like the biggest promotion these days, right? They're on ESPN. So if you have the ESPN Plus apps for them, you're getting all these Top Rank fights for free if you already have it, because of watching the UFC on there. But they put on really good fights, but he's notorious for underpaying fighters, Bob Arum is. He promoted Muhammad Ali. He was a big reason why Muhammad Ali, you know, fought for other fighters and fighter rights, and why the Ali Act came into play. And the Ali Act is basically so that they can be looked at as independent contractors, and that you're not just assigned to a promotion and you can only fight for that promotion. These fighters, they can sign deals where you have to, it's like a 2-fight deal, but the Ali Act kind of got rid of the whole thing of that you're signing your career over to my promotion, and then we just have our way with you once you sign that dotted line. So now fighters are only signing deals for 2-3 fight deals, and a lot of times they'll end up re-signing because you want more than 2 or 3 fights out of an A-class fighter. So a lot of times they put up the money proper so that they can re-sign with the agency. Top Rank does this as well, but Bob Arum's got found his little niche as far as promotional bodies go in boxing. And his whole thing is that he used to really underpay fighters, and even more recently has been on the record kind of saying, as far as Terrence Crawford goes, but also with other fighters, that, you know, if he doesn't have to, he doesn't like to even pay his A-class world champions more than $1 million if he really doesn't have to. He didn't want to pay Sean Porter that much at first to come and fight Terrence there. That was a big to-do, and finally we saw it happen. But yeah, he didn't even want to do that. So he's a little bit of a snake in the grass as far as that's concerned. And but we're doing a deep cut here today, and so all I'm gonna say for now about him is he puts on good fights. Though he puts on a lot of good fights, he puts his good guys against other good guys in and around their weight classes, and you do get to see a lot of quality fights take place under ESPN Top Rank. And also he's got Frank Warren, who is a very successful British promoter that works with him. So they're kind of two separate promoters as well, working with each other to make this happen. But yeah, the one thing that ESPN Top Rank also does better than any other promotion, DAZN, PBC, Fox, or Showtime, any of them, the one thing they do better than anybody, and it probably is the distinguishing mark where they found their niche and that they don't like to pay a lot of money, right, is that they have learned, you know, fighters coming from the Olympics, that we can send talent scouts out and see these guys look great, right? This guy looks great. He's going to be a star. I mean, he might be an undefeated world champion. Either way, he's going to be very battle tested through many amateur fights already, and we can already see the potential that he's going to be stiff competition at the very least for the best in the weight class at pro. And they are very good at sending out their scouts and picking out this talent from the Olympics, which other promoters for some reason don't really do as much. They get everybody from the Olympics. Now, Keyshawn Davis just fought in the Olympics, very famous. They picked him up, and he's going to be on the Oscar Valdez, Shakur Stevenson undercard. You know, they have picked up Xander Zayas, you know, who's a rising star for their organization. And when you do that and you pluck people out of the Olympics and you're not fighting to get them from other promoters because they've already been pro, you don't have to pay them that much. They want the opportunity. And this is where Top Rank kind of does well, and their business model. They found that niche, and then they still get all these very exciting fighters from the amateurs that people do want to see. You know, Muhammad Ali's grandson is on. They're very good about, or if it's a lot of these guys, you know, legends that have grandkids or sons or daughters, that they pluck them because that's a name value, but yet they're pro career hasn't been great or hasn't been started at all yet. They'll pluck those guys too. They pluck people that they know will be in entertaining fights, but that they don't have to pay that much. And don't worry, stay tuned with me, because this is all coming around to a greater, larger point here. The last on the list is PBC, Fox, and Showtime, which I have kind of combined together, although sometimes it's just PBC, Fox, and sometimes they're on Showtime. All these fighters are either they're basically run under Al Heyman. Al Heyman, notorious for, you know, not showing his face. A lot of people don't even know what he looks like. He does not do interviews, and there is no exception to that. He does not do interviews. He pays his fighters more than anybody in boxing, point blank period, by a mile. He treats his fighters very well. He gets them their fights where they want, if they can, in their hometowns and whatnot. And he doesn't put them up, though, against very stiff competition. So this is where the point kind of comes in here. So yeah, if you're a fight fan like me, and I do this same thing, I'm not exempt from this. I'm just creating a point that I've thought about for a long time. You know, you guys are just probably like me, or if you're a fan of watching boxing, right? So you watch it, and then over time you learn, like, hey man, why is there not such great matchmaking? But also, you know, look at, like, if I watch the UFC and they talk about fighter pay, I want to know why the fighters don't get paid more, or I want to know, you know, why we're not seeing the best matchmaking in boxing. There's a direct correlation between them. So you notice, like I said, that Al Heyman, PBC and Showtime, Steven Espinosa for Showtime, all these guys, they pay the fighters very, very well, but yet they have a lot of great fighters too, because people want to go with them because they get paid more, and then they have to fight less sturdy competition. And you'd say, why would they pay them more for that? Well, they have a different business model, you see. So their business model is pay these fighters all the money that they want, and don't really fight with them on that. Pay them a lot of money, overpay them. I mean, just flat out. You're talking about getting fair pay. They're getting overpaid because they're not putting them up against very stiff competition. They're not putting them up against other champions to unify in a weight class mostly. You know, short of the Stephen Fulton Jr. fight that took place where he finally unified the division. That's seldomly seen there, and there's a reason for it. And the reason is, and the point that we've been getting to this whole time, is that when you pay fighters more, and you're a fan and you sit at home and you say, and the UFC guys, I want these guys to get paid more. Well, you're a fan first, though. It's a nice thing to say, and we do like to think we mean it. I like to think I mean it, that I'd love for them to get taken care of, health benefit, getting taken care of when they have health problems, you know, CTE problems, whatnot, when they retire after, get them taken care of, get them paid a lot for sacrificing their bodies and putting in all of that work. They're not going out there and playing fucking basketball after all, you know, so I do like to think I mean that as well. But really, at the end of the day, we're sitting down and we're fans of watching great fights. And when we see those great fights, we appreciate them so much. And we say literally, this is why we watch the sport. Well, here's the thing. If you pay the fighters more, and what the Muhammad Ali Act started and where things are going today, and if you pay the fighters more, and you pay them a lot of money, like PBC Fox does, there's a reason why you don't get all that great matchmaking that's going on in other organizations. And the reason is because in other organizations where you pay your A-class athletes maybe a lot, but not as much as maybe they deserve, and you pay the rest of the guys that don't have such name value attached to them yet, you pay them little to nothing, right? When you do that, like the UFC does, right, you can get good matchmaking, and the reason why is because of what you're paying them. And so even your best stars, you know, Conor McGregor is an exception to this, I will admit, but for the most part, even the guys getting paid the most, Francis Ngannou complained, I didn't get paid that much. So what's $60,000, 60, 70 grand or something for a title defense fight in his last fight, or whatever that was. Now, that's not counting other sponsorships, right? The wearing the gear and whatnot that they have. But by the way, in the UFC, they have less of that than anywhere in boxing. But when you see these fighters complaining, the reason that they can have these great fights is because they say, if it's great, Francis Ngannou won. That's great. If he didn't win, and Cyril Gane, who has way less name value and stardom than Francis Ngannou, if he won, we just give him all the stardom, because we are based on that you buy us for the promotion. You don't buy for individual fighters, and we have a lot of great fighters. And if we lose one or two of even our top guys, that wouldn't bother us. They can stay or they can kind of fuck off, which is like what Dana basically says. He says if they're not happy, they can leave. And that is the motto, and he means it, that they have there, because they'll make new stars, and because they can put their stars, their best stars, they can put them in highly competitive fights that they can lose because they're not that much of an asset to the company. That's the point here. So when you pay fighters a lot, you treat them very well, you take care of them, you take care of your athletes, like Al Heyman does for PBC Fox and Showtime. That's good, right? But that's also why you don't see great matchmaking, because they're being paid enough now where they're more of an asset to the company. They say, if we have we're paying these people extravagant amount of money, and let's say we have 10 or 12 very A-class fighters, we don't want them fighting with each other, because what if one of them loses? And in boxing, you take a loss, certainly 2 losses, you're kind of almost considered done, especially if they're consecutive. Everyone and their mother will shout from the rooftops, this guy should be done, and he could have just been the champion. We're seeing that just now with Miguel Berchelt, who took his 2nd consecutive loss. And that's what happens in the business. So you don't want somebody who you're giving, let's just throw numbers out. Like, let's just say if you have $100, right, and you're dividing that out between people to simplify things, right? And that's what the promotional body has to divide out. If you're the UFC, you're throwing everybody $2 and you don't give a fuck who wins or loses. It doesn't matter. It's going to entertain fans. They're going to want to buy more fights because you're putting on good matchmaking, and you do not have to be concerned with who wins or loses for the most part, unless, again, it's Conor McGregor. They kind of want him to win, but you don't have to be so concerned about who's winning or losing, because then they'll just make a new star. But when you're Al Heyman and PBC Fox and you're paying fighters, even maybe overpaying them, paying them a ton of money, if you have that $100 and you're going, fuck, man, all right, this guy's getting $20, you're gonna look at him and say, now it's your job to matchmake. Well, I think I'm gonna tell the matchmakers that I don't want this guy to fight, in like even my other stars where he could lose. And certainly, as geese are interrupting boxing here, but it is beautiful out here. Certainly, you also don't want your fighter to go to work with other promotional companies, that aren't even you, and give their fighters name value and stardom if they beat your fighter. You certainly don't want to do that. So, right? It's just business models. So they're different. And the last point that I'm going to make here is the UFC being so extravagant, such a big organization that's so popular today, even kind of more so than boxing. They will eventually, I believe, mold over to some extent, right, into maybe more like a Bob Arum does, where they're still greedy enough with the money, but they say, God damn it, all right, because they're getting a lot of fighters now that are saying, we want the Ali Act, we want a union or whatever, we want to be paid more. I see this guy and they're big stars, and this girl, and they're complaining about not getting paid enough. I'm going to jump on board with that as well. That is what we're seeing right now. And if it continues, they might get what they want and get paid more. Maybe not as much as they asked for, but they might end up getting paid more. When we're seeing new contracts coming out with Israel Adesanya and so on and so forth, where they are getting paid more and saying, I made a record amount of money for a contract now in UFC. You're starting to see this, and if this continues and you take care of the fighters, which is what we want, right? And you pay them more money, you will see not as good matchmaking. You won't see great matchmaking anymore, because the more a fighter gets paid, the more money the company is putting into them, and the more they actually, instead of becoming, I have to pay you something and you're putting on the show that we're promoting, it becomes more of we're invested in you, and you are a big part of why this company is going to be successful and create more successful pay-per-views, right? So when you have that kind of business model, you cannot just be so willy-nilly with, sure, that's the number 2 guy, let's have him fight the champ. And that is why boxing got the way it was. Before that, we had the 4 kings, with Sugar Ray Leonard and Roberto Duran and Thomas Hitman Hearns, Marvelous Marvin Hagler, and those guys all fought each other. Right? In the welterweight division, you had Muhammad Ali and fighting everybody. He fought everybody. Sonny Liston, he fought George Foreman, he fought Frazier several times, So the reason that you had all these guys fighting everybody, the reason Manny Pacquiao was able to fight everybody, because he's been boxing forever and comes from that older 80s, early 90s and stuff generation. Even the early 2000s were all right for boxing, pretty damn good. And when everybody was fighting everybody, we slowly went, right? From the 70s to now, it's been a slow progression of less and less good matchmaking that we're seeing, and they'll give you one really good one you want in a year, and maybe two, but besides that, you can still see great fights that happen to shake out as being great fights, but the name value of who they're matchmaking together, and here's this star you know, and you ever heard of this guy? Because that's who he's gonna fight. We're gonna, if it continues going this way, even for UFC, you're going to start to see more than this. And just to prove a final point there, we're gonna just list out the names of some fighters that people have because of their business models. DAZN, who is my favorite, and they treat their fighters well, but they're not overpaying them all the time, right? And they also do not have a pay-per-view model, at least yet. They just have a pay for the app monthly and get all the fights for free, even our big names. People love Eddie Hearn. They love the way they're treated by him. But here's their list is Canelo Alvarez, Anthony Joshua, Ryan Garcia, Triple G, Jaime Munguia, Virgil Ortiz, Alexander Usyk, Demetrius Andrade, Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez, Katie Taylor, Amanda Serrano, Josh Warrington, Leigh Wood. Now, Josh Warrington, Leigh Wood might end up fighting, right? They might end up getting put together. We've already seen Usyk and Anthony Joshua put together on this list because they're putting together good matchmaking, and he wants to make good fights. And we're going to see Katie Taylor versus Amanda Serrano. So just looking at this list of names I've mentioned, we can see how they are actually matching their opponents up together with the best, with the other best in the division that they have in their umbrella. And like I said, they also will even go outside of that and co-promote other events or send a fighter off for a one-fight deal with another promoter because the fighter wants the fight or wants the chance to get the belt. And so they do that. And then we have ESPN Top Rank. We have Tyson Fury, Shakur Stevenson, Oscar Valdez, Vasily Lomachenko, Naoya Inoue, Josh Taylor, Artur Beterbiev. You have Teofimo Lopez, Emmanuel Navarrete, Jose Ramirez, Joe Smith Jr., Xander Zayas, Edgar Berlanga. We are going to get the Shakur Stevenson, Oscar Valdez fight. Not much of those other names have been matched up with each other, right? And that's because now you're paying the fighters less, but maybe they're skating out on you, out of your promotion, one by one. And also because, like I said, their business model is making these exciting fights, but a lot of times use guys we're plucking from the Olympics and the amateurs that have a great steady career and build them up, instead of taking an A-class guy and fighting for him with other promoters on how much you're going to pay him to come to your side of the street. And then, yeah, the PBC Fox one. Now you're going to see how the names, the list, you might know these names even a little bit more, and the list goes on a little further. You got Gervonta Tank Davis, Errol Spence Jr., Deontay Wilder, David Benavidez, Mario Barrios, Adrian Broner, Jamal Charlo, Brian Castano, Chris Colbert, Isaac Cruz. You got Anthony Durrell, Andy Ruiz, Brandon Figueroa, Stephen Fulton Jr., Tony Harris, Arislandi Lara, Gary Russell Jr., Luis Neri, Luis Ortiz, Manny Pacquiao was fighting from, Caleb Plant, who just fought Canelo, Sean Porter, but he is retired now, Guillermo Rigondeaux, Rolly Romero, Leo Santa Cruz, Austin Trout, and your Dennis Ugas, who just beat Manny Pacquiao. You have a lot of great fighters in PBC Fox, PBC and Showtime under Al Heyman, but the problem that we're seeing here is that there's not such great matchmaking happening when you have all these guys, and all the other guys that are in under other promotions, right, promotional bodies. Al Heyman does not like to work with them, and that's because he pays his fighters too much, where it's too much of a risk to put them in extremely competitive fights that they could very easily lose. Until next time, loyal fight fans, stay loyal. I really hope you enjoyed the content today, and just something to think about. We all want fighter pay, but that may directly lead to less good matchmaking in the UFC, and there is just a lot of information that I shared with you on what's going on and what's causing that now in boxing. So you can take that, take a look at it, and kind of look at where the UFC would head if we get what we so-called are asking for, that the fighters get paid more, get treated better, or unionize, or anything like that, really, then it's going to be too much of a risk. They're paying them too much money to take all these risks where they put the most competitive fights, number 1 versus number 2, number 2 versus number 4, out and out and out every week, and that's why you're enjoying it. I got news for you guys. Boxing used to be like that, you guys.